I had been planning our anniversary dinner for weeks. The restaurant was elegant, with soft music floating in the air and candles flickering on every table. Friends and family were gathered to celebrate with us, smiling and laughing as the waiters poured wine and served dishes. But as I looked across the table at my wife, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. She wasn't looking at me, or even at the guests. She was staring down at her phone, her fingers tapping quickly under the tablecloth. I tried to smile, pretending not to notice, but it was impossible to ignore. Every few seconds, her screen lit up again, and she bent lower, almost hiding her face. People were watching. Some whispered. Others glanced at me with pity, as if they already knew something I didn't. It was our anniversary. And she couldn't put her phone away. I lifted my glass, cleared my throat, and stood up. The room grew quiet. Everyone expected a sweet toast about love and marriage. But the words I was about to say would freeze the entire room. I held my glass steady, though my hand felt heavier than ever. My wife barely looked up, just a quick glance before her eyes flicked back to the glowing screen in her lap. First of all, I began, forcing a smile, thank you all for being here tonight. This dinner was meant to celebrate something special, our years together, our bond, and the journey we've shared. People nodded politely, raising their glasses. My wife finally placed her phone on the table, face down, but I could see her jaw tighten. I let a pause hang in the air before continuing. Marriage, as we all know, is built on trust and attention. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when distractions come knocking. The room grew still. Even the clinking of forks and glasses stopped. My wife shifted in her chair, her smile fading as she realized exactly where I was heading. I took a deep breath and leaned closer to the crowd. And tonight, I said slowly, I've realized something very important about what it means when one partner stops choosing the other. Gasps rippled quietly through the room. My wife's hand reached for her phone again, but my next words made her freeze. Her fingers hovered over the phone, but she didn't pick it up. Every eye in the room was fixed on us now. My voice stayed calm, though inside my heart pounded like a drum. You see, I continued, lifting the glass just slightly, a toast isn't just about celebration. Sometimes it's about truth. And the truth is, when someone spends more time texting at an anniversary dinner than looking at their spouse, it says more than words ever could. A murmur broke out among the guests. Some tried to hide their shock, others stared at my wife in disbelief. She forced a laugh, waving her hand dismissively, but her face had gone pale. Darling, you're overreacting, she whispered, loud enough for a few at the table to hear. It's nothing. But I didn't stop. I looked straight at her and then back to the room. I planned tonight as a reminder of love, loyalty, and respect. But sometimes, life gives us reminders in other ways, like glowing phone screens that won't stop lighting up in the dark. The silence that followed was heavier than the music. Even the waiters froze in place, unsure whether to keep serving. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, her phone buzzed again on the table. The name flashing across the screen made several people gasp aloud. The phone vibrated, sliding slightly across the polished wood. A name lit up the screen for everyone close enough to see. The kind of name no one expected to appear during an anniversary dinner. My wife's hand shot forward to cover it, but it was too late, the damage was done. A couple of guests exchanged stunned looks, while others whispered under their breath. I kept my composure, though my chest felt like it was on fire. Funny thing about secrets, I said quietly, lowering my glass. They never stay hidden for long. Not when truth has a way of ringing, or buzzing, at the most inconvenient times. Her lips parted, searching for words, but none came. I turned to the guests, my tone steady. This was supposed to be a celebration. But instead, it's become a reminder, sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come with shouting or arguments. Sometimes they arrive quietly, hidden under a table, while everyone else pretends not to notice. The silence was deafening. My wife gripped her napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white. I set my glass down with finality. So tonight, let's toast, not just to anniversaries, but to honesty. Because without that, there is no marriage worth celebrating. Gasps echoed through the room as I raised my glass high. No one moved. Glasses stayed frozen mid-air. My words had turned what should have been a cheerful dinner into something more like a courtroom. Finally, my wife forced a shaky smile. "It's just work," she blurted out, her voice trembling slightly. "You're embarrassing me for nothing." But the name on the phone wasn't from her office. Too many people had recognized it. The weight of their silence pressed harder with every second. A cousin cleared his throat awkwardly, lowering his eyes. My mother shook her head, disappointment etched across her face. Even the waiters seemed rooted in place, holding trays like statues. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Work," I repeated calmly. "Then maybe you should explain to all of us why work can't wait for a single evening, on the night we promised each other forever." Her cheeks flushed red, anger mixing with panic. "You're twisting this," she whispered harshly, her eyes darting around the room. "This isn't the place." But it was too late. The place was chosen the moment she let her screen glow brighter than our anniversary candles. I leaned forward, voice steady but cutting through the silence. "If respect can't be shown here, in front of family and friends, then where does it exist at all?" The room held its breath. She sat frozen, the phone still under her hand, as if covering it could erase everything. Her hand stayed glued to the phone, her eyes darting around the table as though searching for an escape. The silence had turned suffocating, broken only by the faint clink of a spoon being set down somewhere in the back. Then my uncle shifted in his seat and muttered under his breath, not the kind of anniversary toast I was expecting. A few guests nodded subtly, others avoided eye contact altogether. My wife straightened, trying to steady herself. "This is ridiculous," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't sound like laughter at all. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." But the truth was, it wasn't me making them uncomfortable, it was the buzzing phone, the name that everyone had seen, and the tension in her eyes that gave her away more than anything else. My sister leaned toward her husband and whispered something, her gaze flicking to me with quiet sympathy. Even the waiters, frozen in the corner, exchanged looks as though they were witnessing something that would be retold long after tonight. I stayed calm. "If the truth makes people uncomfortable," I said evenly, "maybe that says something about the truth itself." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her composure beginning to crack. She opened her mouth to respond, but the phone betrayed her again, another buzz, another notification lighting up the table like a spotlight. This time, the entire room saw it. The second buzz echoed like thunder in the silence. The name lit up again, clear, undeniable. There was no way to explain it away this time. A ripple went through the guests. Someone gasped softly, another covered their mouth with a hand. My wife's face drained of color. She pressed the screen down with her palm, as though crushing it could erase what everyone had just seen. Her voice shook as she tried to salvage the moment. It's not what it looks like." But the problem was, it looked exactly like what everyone feared. And no one in that room believed her anymore. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply looked at her and said, "Then tell us what it is." Her mouth opened, but no words came. The silence stretched, heavy, unbearable. Family and friends shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some staring at the table, others at me, waiting. At last, she whispered, "Please, not here." Her eyes glistened, her voice cracking. "Can we just talk about this later? Privately?" But the room wasn't private anymore. The truth had already spilled into the open, and everyone knew it. I raised my glass again, my voice steady, though my heart weighed 1,000 pounds. This was meant to be a celebration of loyalty. Instead, it became a reminder that even the strongest vows mean nothing if one person walks away from them in silence. The guests didn't move. The candles flickered. And in that moment, the entire room sat frozen between shock and heartbreak. The air was thick with tension, every pair of eyes bouncing between me and my wife. No one dared to move, until finally my aunt broke the silence. She set her glass down carefully and said, almost in a whisper, "We all came here to celebrate love." But what we just witnessed, she shook her head, unable to finish. Her words opened the floodgates. A cousin murmured, "I knew something felt off," while another guest muttered, "On their anniversary, of all nights." My wife sat rigid, her hands trembling around a napkin she twisted in her lap. "Stop it," she snapped suddenly, her voice sharp. "This isn't your business. None of you understand." But the damage was done. The room had turned against her, not out of malice, but out of the undeniable truth that had just been revealed. People avoided her gaze, some with pity, some with disappointment. I didn't raise my voice. I just said calmly, "Marriage isn't only between two people. It's also about the trust witnessed and respected by everyone around us. Tonight, that trust was shattered in front of all who care about us." Her lips quivered. For a moment, it seemed like she wanted to fight back, to argue, but the buzzing phone had already spoken louder than anything she could say. The silence fell again. This time, no one even tried to break it. Her chair scraped softly against the floor as she shifted, unable to sit still under the weight of so many eyes. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "It's complicated." A low murmur rippled across the table, but no one interrupted. Everyone waited, holding their breath, as though the entire evening had been leading to this single moment. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked down at the phone under her hand, then back up at me. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't. It just did." The words hit like a blade, quiet but sharp enough to cut through every heart in the room. Some guests shook their heads in disbelief. My mother whispered something to my father, who clenched his jaw, staring hard at the table. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just let the silence stretch, forcing her to continue. "I was lonely," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." Her confession hung heavy in the air. No one moved. No one even dared to sip their wine. The anniversary dinner had turned into a public unraveling, and there was no turning back. I set my glass down slowly. "So the truth finally speaks," I said softly, every word carrying across the still room. The room erupted in whispers, some sharp, some filled with disbelief. A cousin muttered, "I can't believe this," while my aunt buried her face in her hands. The quiet elegance of the restaurant now felt like a stage for a tragedy no one expected to witness. My wife's tears spilled freely as she looked at me, desperate. "Please," she begged. "Don't do this here. Don't make this worse than it already is." But it wasn't me who had made it worse. It was the buzzing phone, the secret messages, and the silence that had stretched too long. I stood tall, my glass still in hand, my voice steady but unshakably firm. Anniversaries are supposed to remind us of why we chose each other. But tonight I was reminded of something else, that sometimes, love dies quietly, replaced by distractions, lies, and secrets. The entire room fell silent again, every guest frozen as my words echoed. I looked directly at her, then around at the faces of family and friends who had come expecting laughter and joy. "So let this be the toast," I said finally. "Not to a marriage that has already crumbled, but to the truth, because at least the truth has the courage to show itself when lies cannot." And with that, I raised my glass high. A few hesitant guests followed, their glasses trembling in the candlelight. My wife sat broken, her face buried in her hands, as the weight of the evening crushed down around her. The dinner that was meant to celebrate love had ended with silence, and a truth no one could unhear. The clinking of a few glasses echoed weakly, but it wasn't a celebration. It was the sound of people too stunned to know what else to do. Most lowered their drinks quickly, unsure if raising them had been the right thing at all. My wife stayed frozen in her chair, her shoulders shaking as she hid her face. The phone lay on the table beside her napkin, silent now, but its glow had already scorched through everything we had built. Slowly, people began to move. My sister stood first, murmuring, "Maybe we should give them space." Chairs shifted, shoes scraped against the floor, and one by one, our guests began excusing themselves. Some avoided looking at me. Others touched my arm lightly in passing, their eyes filled with sympathy. Within minutes, the crowded room grew emptier, the chatter and laughter replaced by a heavy silence. Only a few close relatives lingered near the back, torn between wanting to help and knowing there was nothing left to say. I remained standing, my glass untouched now. My wife finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. "You didn't have to humiliate me," she whispered. "Not like this." I met her eyes calmly. "I didn't humiliate you. The truth did." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she seemed ready to argue, but the fight was gone from her. She looked down, broken, as the last of our guests slipped quietly out the door. The anniversary dinner was over. What remained was only the wreckage. The night air outside the restaurant felt colder than I expected, sharp against my face as I stepped onto the quiet street. Behind me, through the tall glass windows, I could still see her, sitting alone at the long table, shoulders hunched, face hidden in her hands. For a moment, I stood there frozen, torn between the ache of what we once had and the clarity of what I had just witnessed. My heart wanted to rewind, to pretend the dinner had gone differently, but my mind knew better. The door opened softly behind me. It was my sister. She placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You did what you had to do. Don't question it now." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. She was right. Tonight had exposed the truth, and no matter how painful it was, truth was better than a lifetime of lies. As my family gathered around me, offering quiet support, I realized something: this ending, as devastating as it felt, was also a beginning. A chance to rebuild, not with her, but with myself, with the people who had always stood by me, and with the life I deserved. I turned away from the restaurant lights and began walking down the street, leaving behind the candles, the broken vows, and the woman who had chosen secrets over love. Our anniversary had ended, but my story wasn't finished. It was just starting a new chapter. As I walked away from the restaurant, the sound of my footsteps on the empty street felt like punctuation marks to the night's bitter truth. Every step carried both pain and clarity. Behind me was the wreckage of what should have been a celebration. Ahead of me was the unknown, but it was mine, unchained from deceit. I thought about the vows we once made, the promises whispered years ago when love felt unshakable. Those words had been beautiful then, but words without action are nothing more than echoes. Tonight had proved that. When the candles went out, when the music faded, when the guests left in silence, what remained was truth. Raw, undeniable, and painful. But truth, unlike lies, was solid. It was something I could build upon. So I lifted my chin, breathed in the cold air, and let the night close around me. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the end of hers and mine. And while our anniversary dinner had left the entire room frozen, it had left me free.